Here's the thing nobody wants to admit about Social Security. 62 is the age where most financial advisors tell you flat out that you're making a mistake, that you're leaving money on the table, that patience always wins. For a huge chunk of Americans, that advice is completely wrong for their situation. Maybe it's right for you, maybe it isn't. That's the uncomfortable part nobody sits with. Every advisor has a script. Every finance influencer has a chart. And the Social Security Administration itself used to run a break-even calculator on their own site, then quietly pulled it because people kept treating a rough estimate like gospel truth. Think about that. The government built a tool to help you make one of the biggest financial calls of your life, watched people misuse it constantly, and just took it down instead of fixing it. That tells you something about how messy this decision actually is. So today I'm walking you through 7 legitimate, defensible reasons why filing at 62 can genuinely be the smarter move. Not because early is always right, but because the real math here is far more layered than the one-line advice you keep hearing. I'll show you how the actual decision works, why the standard wait until 70 playbook can quietly cost some of you real money, and why your health, your spouse, your portfolio, and even the market itself all get a vote in this decision. Before we get into it, I put together a free retirement income calculator that actually models these variables properly, because most free ones online skip half of what matters. I only asked for an email to send you the results, nothing else, nothing stored. Links in the description if you want to run your own numbers while you watch. Now picture Social Security as a water tank on a timer. Every year you wait to open the valve, the tank fills a little higher, and when it finally opens, the water comes out with more force. That part's true, and it's why "just wait" sounds like obviously correct advice. But here's what it skips. It's your tank. You filled it over decades of payroll taxes. And if you wait too long, or if life gets in the way before you open that valve, some of that water just sits there. Nobody refunds you for the years you didn't use it. The debate around Social Security timing really comes down to one question. When does it make sense for you to open your valve? And wait as long as possible ignores that, for a lot of real households, there are rational reasons to open it early. 7 of them, actually, and I want to build the numbers out first so you can see what's being weighed against what. Let's use a simple example. Call him Gerald, who made around $85,000 in his final working year, a realistic upper-middle income. He has 3 choices: file at 62 and collect around $2,100 a month, wait until full retirement age of 67 and collect closer to $3,000, or hold out until 70 for around $3,700. The textbook approach calculates which path puts more total dollars in his pocket by the time he passes away. Lower payments for more years, or bigger payments for fewer years. The crossover point usually lands in the early 80s, but here's where most online calculators quietly mislead people. The Social Security Administration's own actuarial tables don't use average life expectancy from birth, which sits closer to 79. They use life expectancy for someone who's already reached 62 without a major health event, closer to 84. So if Gerald lives to 84, filing at 62 beats waiting until full retirement age by tens of thousands of dollars. Nudge that life expectancy assumption down 3 years, and waiting wins out. Drop it 6 years, and early filing versus full retirement age becomes nearly a coin flip, with filing right in the middle sometimes beating both. The real problem was never early versus late. It's that none of us know our own expiration date, and that uncertainty is the entire game being played here. Now here's a variable almost nobody factors into the basic break-even math: the annual cost of living adjustment. Most simplified comparisons set that adjustment to 0, but in reality, your benefit gets bumped for inflation every year you're collecting it. And here's what compounds quietly in the background. If your base benefit is bigger because you waited, every future cost of living bump is calculated off that bigger number, the same mechanic as compound interest. A 3% bump on $3,700 is a very different amount than 3% on $2,100, and over 15 or 20 years, that gap widens into real money. Rebuild the model with realistic inflation included, and the gap between filing at 62 and waiting until 70 can swing well past $200,000 over a long retirement. That's a completely different financial outcome depending on which path you take. If any of this is making you rethink what you assumed you knew, go ahead and hit subscribe now, because the algorithm buries channels that dig into the actual math instead of surface-level talking points, and I don't want you missing the next one. So with the full picture in front of us, let's walk through the 7 situations where filing at 62 is the smart, defensible move, and not just an impatient one. Reason number 1 is straightforward, but people still feel awkward saying it out loud. Your health is genuinely compromised, or your family history points to a shorter runway. If your father passed at 71 and your mother at 74, and you've already had a cardiac scare of your own, the entire break-even calculation shifts hard toward filing now. A bigger monthly check 20 years from now does nothing for you if you're not around to receive enough of those payments. Filing early here isn't giving up, it's making sure you actually collect on a system you paid into for 40 years. Back to the tank metaphor. If your tank has a slow leak, you don't wait for it to fill all the way. You use what's already there. Reason number 2 is wanting to actually enjoy retirement while your body still lets you. People dismiss this as emotional, but there's real substance behind it. Retirement spending tends to follow a predictable curve, high in the early active years, tapering through the middle, and dropping sharply once mobility and health limit what you can do. $1 at 63 buys you a different life than $1 at 79, even though it's the same amount on paper, because your capacity to use it isn't the same. I think about a man who kept telling himself he'd enjoy life once the timing was better, finally retired at 73, and spent much of the next 2 years managing new health issues instead of the travel he'd planned for decades. The money showed up on schedule. The window to enjoy it didn't wait around for him. Reason number 3 is unlocking spousal benefits sooner, a coordination move that gets skipped in a lot of one-size-fits-all advice. If your spouse never built up enough work history for a meaningful benefit of their own, or their benefit is much smaller than yours, they may be entitled to a spousal benefit worth up to half of your full retirement age amount. But that spousal benefit can't start flowing until you file. Filing at 62 turns that income stream on years earlier than waiting would. Picture a couple sitting across from an advisor who tells the higher earner to hold out until 70, while nobody in that meeting mentions that the spouse spent 2 decades out of the workforce raising kids and has almost no benefit of their own. That household just quietly lost years of income they were entitled to the whole time. Reason number 4 is the one that surprises people most, and honestly the one I think carries the most financial weight. If your spouse is the higher earner and is dealing with a serious or terminal health condition, their life expectancy may genuinely be shorter than average. When they pass, you as the surviving spouse step into their larger survivor benefit. So the smart play becomes filing on your own smaller benefit at 62 now, collecting something while your spouse is still living, then switching to their bigger survivor benefit later. You're not leaving years of your own benefit completely uncollected while waiting for a switch that was always going to happen anyway. This is the one scenario where filing early is almost always the right call, regardless of most other factors on this list. Reason number 5 is one almost nobody talks about outside niche financial research: a market crash. If you're drawing retirement income from a portfolio and the market drops 40 or 50%, selling shares at a steep loss just to cover expenses locks in damage your portfolio may never fully recover from. Turning on Social Security during a downturn creates a guaranteed income floor that lets you stop selling depreciated assets and gives your portfolio room to recover. There's a flip side too. If you haven't started drawing down yet and the market tanks, using that guaranteed income to buy quality assets while they're cheap is a strategy that looks brilliant in hindsight, even though it feels uncomfortable in the moment. Reason number 6 comes down to taxes, specifically provisional income and the so-called tax torpedo. Right now, up to 85% of your Social Security benefit can become taxable once your income crosses certain thresholds. But here's the angle most people miss. If you're in a genuinely low-income stretch, maybe between jobs, maybe already retired, but not yet required to pull from traditional retirement accounts, your Social Security might be taxed lightly or not at all during that window. Once required minimum distributions kick in, your taxable income jumps. If Social Security is already flowing before that happens, you've banked several years of lightly taxed income before the wave hits. Filing early, in that light, is a deliberate tax sequencing move. Reason number 7 is the simplest and the one people are most embarrassed to admit. You genuinely need the income right now. Life doesn't always follow the plan on the whiteboard. Medical bills pile up, a small business fails, a pension disappears, family members need support you didn't budget for. Social Security exists precisely as a safety net for moments like these, and using it when you need it isn't a failure of planning. It's the entire point of the program existing in the first place. Let me make this concrete with one more scenario. Take a woman we'll call Donna, 62, recently retired, married to a husband who's 66 with a considerably higher benefit and a serious heart condition. Donna's own benefit at 62 is about $1,900 a month, climbing to around $2,600 if she waits for full retirement age, a genuinely appealing jump on paper. But her husband passes away at 68. Had Donna waited to file, she'd have collected nothing for 6 years before switching to his survivor benefit anyway. By filing at 62 instead, she collected roughly $130,000 of her own benefit before the switch, money that simply wouldn't have existed otherwise. The tank was full and available. She just had to open the valve. To be fair, there are absolutely situations where waiting until 70 is the stronger play, particularly if you're in excellent health, have a healthy portfolio, no pension gap, and a spouse whose benefit is also strong. The gap mentioned earlier, well over $200,000 in some scenarios, is very real for the right household. And if your investments aren't consistently outperforming roughly 8% a year, close to the guaranteed return delaying effectively provides, waiting can be genuinely hard to beat. So the real question was never simply early or late. It's which of these 7 situations apply to your specific life, because this isn't a generic math puzzle with one universal answer. It's a personal decision shaped by variables unique to your household. And it's worth remembering the financial planning industry has a built-in incentive to push you toward delaying, since many advisors are compensated based on portfolio size. The longer you avoid drawing it down, the longer their fee base stays larger. That's not necessarily dishonest, just an incentive worth knowing before taking generic advice at face value. Here are 3 practical steps to walk away with. First, run your own break-even numbers. Then shift your life expectancy assumption up and down by a few years, and watch how sensitive the right answer actually is. If it flips with a small change, the margin is thin and worth thinking through carefully. Second, if you're married, never look at your filing decision in isolation. Model the household as a whole, spousal and survivor benefits together, since one partner's choice shapes what the other receives. Third, if you're in a market downturn, a low-income year, or a health crisis in the family, that's exactly when it's worth revisiting your plan, not sticking rigidly to a decision made years ago in calmer circumstances. The Social Security Administration pulled its own break-even tool because people treated a starting estimate as a final verdict. Don't make that same mistake with your own retirement.